Welcome everybody. Now Atakan Cankorur is with us. Now he is a game designer from Art Games, and he is going to talk about how they can find platforms and IPs for this. Thank you and welcome again. I'm also a CEO, by the way, in addition to the game designer. Today, we are going to talk about the intellectual property. Let's talk about the intellectual properties and how it could be used. And these intellectual properties are what we call games, which has their own world and assets. And you can see Assassin's Creed, for example, which they all have their own games, and it has their own TV shows, for example. And with that TV show, they create console games, mobile games. So these IPs can be used more than one place. So how are we creating these intellectual properties? About the usage of these games in other areas, it is possible, as I've said the same thing, I think. Now, these are worlds that has its own content, and it has a specific concepts of its and consistency within the world. Who are the good guys, bad guys? What are the structures and geography world? So it is a giant source of content. Of course, now I'm not talking about making a game that costs $100 million, but at the end of the day, the smaller projects can be used in different areas. And if I'm going to give an example, for example, I will talk about Portrayal, our own game, as Arvis Games. We had a Battle Royale card game. As you know, PUBG, Fortnite is an example of Battle Royale. Now we made a card game version of that. And we also created a board game, which is physically, which you can go and purchase as a box. And we have created the world of Portrayal, and now we also are coming the mobile and PC versions of that. Now, I'm going to talk about in terms of game design. So how did we place the world and how are we going to transition it to other platforms? The difference of our game design for this IP is these battleground games are usually about being quickest to aim, quickest to shoot, but we wanted to turn it into a genre that is focusing on the smarts of the player. A smarter player would be successful. Now we are going to turn this system a battle royale game. Now we are transitioning to PC and mobile platforms. Well, it was a tabletop game. It had a lot of resource management. Now, the reason for that is, of course, you have to create the mechanics with your target audience in mind. For example, people who play tabletop games has an understanding of strategy, and you have to place it within that understanding. But in battle royales, battle royale is a very casual concept, so it is something that people know who play daily, and we all know the examples, of course. And now to turn it about intelligence and strategy, we are trying to combine it to be able to present it to the casual board gamers. So that's why you have to create the main mechanics and then create the side mechanics in that on top of that. And our main mechanic was resource management. And now our mobile version has a different target audience, because the reason for that is in tabletop, players interact with each other, and it is harder to achieve in mobile and PC. So we have to have, for example, in other platforms, we added emojis to be able to see that. And also, if you want to also reach the giant mass in the mobile platform, you have to be thinking about that. And for example, for tabletop gamers, it is a bit more mid-level, but for mobile games, it's a lot more casual. Now, the board game had 5 resources. We lowered that to 1 resource in mobile, and in Fight Buddy version, which is the mobile version, we are going to have other mechanics in specifically on that single currency. And it also has to have consistency between platforms, because your players from your first game will also follow you to others, but also new players are going to come to that as well. So you need a system that is going to please both sides. So you have to keep your main mechanics the same. For example, PUBG, PC and mobile have similarities and some adaptation, like automatic aiming and other stuff, depending on the needs of the platform, depending on the target audience on that platform. You will be able to find examples of this in other games as well. And as we know, mobile is a growing market, and mobile allows extreme accessibility, lowering of the cost for the requirement of games. And I do not think there will be an area that doesn't have mobile games. I think everybody has to have a mobile at this point, and all the most IPs have mobile versions or extensions at this point. One method is keeping the game as similar as possible, or another method would be having a properly, or maybe making the best version of your game which can be adapted into mobile systems. For example, Witcher's, yes, when I see you, I reminded of Witcher Geralt, you know. Yes, Witcher game has a game within the game which is called Gwent. Gwent was very loved by everybody. And CD Projekt Red said, if people love this mini game in our game, we are going to also publish Gwent as a standalone game in the mobile platform. They adapted it to mobile, and they also achieved some success in that area. And this is one example. Another example could be Pokemon. And they have, you know, cartoons, series, toys, films, console game, PC games, mobile games, and Pokemon Go, for example. There is a giant IP in Pokemon, and what should be followed is, especially for Pokemon, there's about a 30 years, maybe 30 years to 20 years of history. And this means that they catch different generations. So newer generations or next generation will be able to adapt to Pokemon, and following that development is a very big important point. It is a keyword to adapt to the times, and how that intellectual property developed, how did Nintendo first was doing developing it themselves, then they turned Pokemon into its own company. And at the same time, the games that started out in mobile, it is a bit difficult to transition into PC because mobile games do not really have communities. It is very difficult. For example, in Supercell, it is possible they have their own membership and forums and Discord, and they can create the fan base, but it is very difficult for mobile games. Of course, maybe some of them will be able to create a valuable IP through that and continue working on that. I'm not going to, of course, talk about the evaluation and pricing of IPs, but for game design, this is entirely different, especially the mechanics, the value that you create with that game is if you are able to transition that into another platform, it usually works. And at the same time, a game that is released in PC, could it be a tabletop game? Yes, for example, Witcher's tabletop game is very successful currently. It is very new. And the thing is, by doing this, they are also adding a Witcher in their homes. So CD Projekt Red is strengthening their brand. And with that, it is also improving their brand recognition. And of course, tabletop games. I think the Witcher is Witcher's perfect, most loved time period is where Witcher and Ciri and other characters are. So they transitioned that into a tabletop game. Now, Frostbank is another example. Darkest Dungeon is another example that also is publishing a board game, and which is much more interesting is Kingdom Rush was a web game first, then it was extremely successful in mobile. Now it is also coming out with a board game, and their main mechanics are it's the same. So Kingdom Rush is a tower defense game. Well, they were creating this tabletop game. They didn't turn it into an RPG. So what's also important is if a game is competitive in this area, it also has to be competitive focused in another area as well, in another platform, because people who are fans of the game have to be able to also experience a similar feeling in another platform. Did I talk too fast? I think, sorry about that. Mainly in Turkey, mobile is extremely fast in growth, and mobile is where the most income is, revenue is. And the other hand, it is the consoles and PC, which is the rest of the revenue of the gaming industry. And between these two worlds, the revenue scenarios are very different. Now, well, we are all making games. What we think about is, in general, in Turkey, I mean, people who start up in this industry, developing games in terms of device ratios. So a successful game would be successful in all devices. But if you take a look at the genres in terms of revenue, that is very different. For example, according to the Sensor Tower's most recent report, casual is about 26% of the gaming industry's revenue. Rest of it is casual is what, like 26 around, and 60% is mid-core or higher. And within mid-core, biggest breaking points are RPGs and strategies. Of course, there are casino games and sport games are other rest of the percentages, and generally we are focusing on this 26% area. Of course, if you are developing a casual game, you are targeting that 26% in the revenue pie, and it is important how we are increasing that. Of course, within casual, we have also the PC casuals or other casuals. All the devices are also included in here. So while we were designing a game or planning for that, you should also think about the different areas, genres, and platforms. You will be able to evaluate the best area for a game, and you must use the most suitable area for a specific genre or designation of a game in terms of value proposition. Is in our company, we don't think about platform. We don't do games for mobile or PC or console. We can do all of them as long as that game is going to be a good experience. So working, we are working on a cross-platform system, but of course we need a proper game design theme. Let's say we are making a space game and we have a spaceship, and that has to shoot and destroy a planet. Even if it's not 100% the same, you have to have a very consistent transition of the other platforms. So the consistency is extremely important. For example, if Frodo were to use a lightsaber, or having a lightsaber in a Middle Earth game, it wouldn't be acceptable. So your base would not like that. So while we are creating these worlds, especially you are creating a game with a proper IP, you have to be careful about that. While we are designing a game, if you are focusing on growing multi-platform, you have to be properly realizing and choosing the target audience and decide on the mechanics that those target audience are going to be preferring. And when you are releasing your game in another platform, you can find success there. I'm sorry, I've spoken extremely fast. If there are questions, maybe I can answer them. For now, we don't have any questions in the online area. If there are questions in the conference room, we may be able to answer those. I'm somebody who prefers PC gaming, for example, especially MMORPGs. I've seen some examples, some MMORPGs they've tried to make it easier, but of course, while playing on PC, you have a lot of buttons. It's much different how to play. So is there no games that can't be adapted to a specific platform? Like, is there any genre that you would say you can't transition? Yes, definitely there are genres like that. You have to sometimes stop yourself. If your game is something like that, you might prefer to not be in another platform. And there are successful examples in the recent years, but what you should focus on especially is visual quality. You have to be able to have the mobile quality that mobile devices can also run, because Either you're going to let go about 80% of Android, for example, or you could say that no, then we are going to lower our visual fidelity and make it playable in all devices. So for user experience, player experience, it is possible to find a proper version of it, but it takes a lot of time. As you said, the hardware is changed, screens are different. If you start by caring about it, then it could work. But if you would just say, let's transition in first, then we will try to fix it, it would be very difficult to fix it afterwards. For example, when you code a PC game to a mobile, would you have a player loss because the fact that it can be played cross-platform? I mean, the player in PC, when they download it in mobile as well, they wouldn't say this is terrible in mobile. I wouldn't play it on PC either, because these are fans. They would continue to play the PC one even if they didn't like the mobile one. So that doesn't make us lose any players. Unfortunately, question is not able to be heard by the translators. That is not the case. I think it's like emulators, like the emulators are causing another use case. For example, it is hard to design for that, but I think what I believe is I believe we will be able to play all platforms from one device, because I think it's inevitable, because Nvidia, for example, have resources for that. Google has tried it, but I think world is going forward to a one device world. I think all the companies will be caring about it, because we don't know if they are using emulator or not. But as long as I don't say it's designed for emulator, it's not my responsibility. It's like saying we design Monopoly, but why is there no locks on the safes? So as rubber, or is going to be a rubber, like a yogurt uh, cups can be used as a plant, where you can plant plants, but you can't control everything. But at the end of the day, in the future, I believe we will be caring about being a single platform in the future. It is not correct to have that, because nobody can say or cannot say that no new device will be released in 2 years. So the world didn't even know about blockchain games 2 years ago. So there could be a place where blockchain is also meeting with these online gaming platforms. But I think at the end of the day, it's in the future is going to focus on conglomerate on one device, because in the past, at the start of 2000s, it was a luxury. It was something that only people with PCs can play. but currently it is the cheapest entertainment. If you play a game for 100 hours and pay $5 for that, it is extremely cheap per hour. If you were to go to a cinema and watch a movie for 2 hours, it is 10 times more example. So everybody's entering it, and it's extremely rapidly growing. It's going to be one of the biggest industries in the world, and as accessibility increases, you can say that we are at the beginning of the growth of the gaming industry, and the step that you're talking about is going to take us to unbelievable places. And I think at one point it's just going to be about having a device which can play all the games. This might be supported by blockchain or another internet infrastructure, some satellite system, whatever is going to be possible. Everybody is going to be able to play games in the future, and accessibility is going to increase. But we will talk about genres at this point only. Which genre is going to be preferred instead of which platform. I think it's not going to take 50 years. In close future, the platforms will start to converge. Big gaming companies, for example, are purchasing big mobile developers. For example, Peak Games has purchased Zynga. Take-Two purchased Zynga. Who is Take-Two? They produce PC games. So why would that be the case? At the basis, they are purchasing their mobile know-how, and they are using their know-how to strengthen their company. At the end of the day, we are all producing games. So I think everybody should be focused on making good games. And in the close future, in the next 10 years or 20 years, all the games are going to be accessible from everywhere. Especially blockchain games in the last 2 years, for example. Have any of you tried to use them? Do you know about the number of barriers for that? Create a wallet, connect your wallet, and give access to it. There are huge barriers in that sense. Yeah, of course there will be, and it's like when the first Amiga was released, it didn't appear in everybody's homes at the first week. Removing the barriers and making it more and more accessible is the natural evolution of this. This is going to reach that place one day. Of course, there are a lot of games that is trying that. There are a lot of platforms, and as you said, as accessibility increases, emulation is a specific example, but I think we are going to have to focus on multi-platform games. This was a long answer, sorry about it.
Actually, so let me put it that way. So you come up with an idea, a game idea, for example. By making that game we can call it X. What kind of difference does this game X have? What kind of value it can generate? Is there any representation or any reflection of that value in players? If we have an audience, a target audience, we should ask the question whether that target audience will play that casual game. Would it be targeted for the casual puzzle game? No, if it is for other types of target audience, we cannot. target properly. You need to calculate very well to whom you are trying to attain and what device those audience use, and whether you get a reflection, a return out of your model. If you have, and then you can pass to the other platforms later on. So yeah, you are right, but marketing does not start when you create a game. As an experienced person, this is something I've recently learned, because I have a couple of 5 games and none of them generated money for me. I had retention of 80%, sorry, 70% of one of my games, but it wasn't a revenue generating for me. It's not like pushing the game to the market. You have to start by adapting your product to the market. So marketing starts within the design of the market. Marketing is like releasing your product into market directly. I think in our team, they have been answering many questions in marketing department. It's more, the questions that I answer is more than the questions that I answer in the development part. Many questions are being asked in the marketing one, because there are many details in the marketing field. Marketing field is a huge field. It's a different world. Marketing is a whole department. It's not something that you can achieve with a couple of team members. Marketing is another department. If you have a software team, then you need to have the marketing team as well. It's not like opening the marketing after you create the product. It's not that easy. It just releasing is the one of the easiest things in the process, actually. The opening and closing the advertisement and publishing them is just a small part of the process. The most important thing is to whom we are going to deliver the product and who will like it most. The marketing is one of the most important element in the process. No matter good your product is, you will just entertain yourself. If you cannot deliver your product to the appropriate target audience, that delivering the product to the target audience is one of the most challenging elements of the process. No, there's no meaning in making a game. Software is not, you can't work with the software only. No, I don't know actually. We need to test it. We need to conduct a testing process. And there are some AI companies that you can get pro service from. A very challenging question, I might say. By the way, in the gaming sector, it's hard to say a precise word because, it's a sector where the knowledge changes so fast. What we say might be changed, might be different the other day. So it's hard to say definite sentences, in practice, we can say that my game is, for example, medieval fantastic game. I have a sword in that game. And let's say that, of course, using an item on the mobile will generate something, will have some good results. If that item is only on the mobile, maybe I cannot get the desired result. Scaling it is very challenging one. I should have asked my marketing team to come. I don't know that game, Medieval Fantastic. It's not something that I know. Medieval Fantastic was in Batman and Joker was added to the game. Yeah, I think they have changed. They were out of the context completely. Maybe it was a ideal, a good result. Maybe that's what they're trying to do, because those decision makers are predicting something. Maybe they said, maybe they couldn't get a good result in the mobile platform. Maybe they said we should put Batman Joker in the game. If they use that, maybe they just gave up on a medieval context, and then they decided to go with the Batman and Joker. Yeah, the short-term or long-term damages might be depending on the politics of the company. If the company says, I'm not going to be here, I'll not survive, 5 years later, it's another decision. So that's how the policies on survival come up. You can create a certain type of game and expect a revenue that can be generated in a couple of years, and you can sell after you generate that kind of money. You can sell the company, or you can think in a long term, and you can want to have more revenue in a long time. Depends on the company strategy. So maybe they said, maybe they just decided to transform the whole audience, because it's a multiplayer game. So they said gamers are not paying anything. Maybe they just were spending so less. Maybe they decided to create. They decided to spend their money on creating audience. Maybe they said, maybe we can do something that can deter other gamer players. Very serious game, because hundreds of people are deciding on something. But there are also some companies that decide so badly. Is there any question? Okay, all right. So I wish that you can make good games and don't think about the rest. If we can make good games, it's possible for you to earn more. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Atakan Cankorur, for your participation. See you. Good luck, everyone.